It's been quite some time since I last spoke about Chapman Guitars, but recently I saw something that gave me a sense of déjà vu. Chapman have announced a new line of premium made-in-England guitars. Again. Now before we look at this new range of guitars, I think it's important to look back through the history books at their several other attempts at trying this, and we can see where things may have changed and where other things may not have changed. The first made-in-England Chapmans that were offered to the public for purchase were released in 2010. It was the Ghost Wrap model, and it was made by luthier Jaden Rose under the Chapman name. They were available to order for £1,500, and in retrospect that does seem like a pretty good price for that guitar, though it seems that, at the time at least, that was too much for the Chapman demographic, and as far as I'm aware, only two were made. A green prototype for Rob, and a black one for a then Chapman artist, David Evans. But those are the only ones that I can remember. If you didn't know, I was a Chapman Guitars fan from almost the very start, and they were also the only ones that I could find from that time. That line of instruments ceased to exist, and Chapman continued on to make more affordable guitars. That was until 2012 when they tried again.
There's going to be a British handmade custom version of the ML1 guitar from Chapman Guitars.
There was no talk of who was building these, but the materials and kind of the looks of the guitar do remind me of Jaden Rose quite a bit. And in the comments of that announcement video, it was said that these guitars were going to retail for £899. Certainly not bad. However, again, to my knowledge, there were only 3 built. There was a brown one for Rob, and then a blue and a black for 2 other Chapman artists. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any good high quality pictures of these guitars on the internet because the 2 artists no longer endorse Chapman and seem to have removed any content. I did find a clip of the blue one being played though. And a picture of Rob's build on the workbench, and I could find no mention of this line after that. Then in 2018, Chapman launched the British Standard line, a line of guitars that I have talked about before.
These are amazing. I mean, these guitars are as good as anything, in our opinion anyway, that you can buy from any other brand.
However, since then, some very interesting information has come to light. They announced the guitars at NAMM 2018. The price?
Okay, this is going to be £3,500, £3,500, probably close to €4,000.
£3,500. Quite a bit of money. And at NAMM, Anderton said that they could build about 10 guitars a month.
Everything is built to order. We could probably make 10 guitars a month at the moment.
But in the official promotion video, they were saying the lowest they'd be building would be 15 guitars a month.
To make the most incredible guitars in limited runs. These are going to be made in runs as small as, some months, 15 guitars. So if you get one, then congratulations.
Now 15 guitars a month is a lot. Well, 10 guitars a month is a lot. That's between 120 and 180 guitars a year. But then 1 year later, in 2019, almost to the day, it was in January, this statement was released.
The demand for the British Standard series has exceeded all our wildest expectations, and as a result, the workshop Chapman Guitars uses to manufacture them is unable to offer the capacity required. As a result, we have decided to open our own British workshop in Brighton, something that we are very excited about. This will unfortunately mean delays to the manufacturing process while we relocate, but ultimately having our own workshop back at Chapman HQ gives us much more control and opens the door for many exciting opportunities in the future.
And just so we're not misconstruing anything, there were some comments and replies to said comments.
This is sort of surprising. Ever since the release last year at NAMM, very little has been said about the British Standard series. When released, I read a lot of pessimism about the viability of the series. The lack of media seemed to support that position, but this turns the narrative upside down. Congrats to Chapman Guitars and crew. Thanks man, it's been crazy and we're so thankful for the demand on these guitars.
So, a huge and unexpected demand. Bear in mind, we were talking 10 to 15 guitars a month, so this must exceed that by quite a bit. You would expect to see 1 or 2 guitars other than the 4 NAMM prototypes, but we didn't. Not even one. Which you could probably say is a little bit unusual for a line of guitars with supposedly such a big demand, especially for a social media based company like Chapman. But when I questioned this some years ago, the story changed. In the infamous and now deleted My Truth video, Rob stated that the owner of the workshop that they were using wanted to retire and wanted to sell his workshop to them, and they backed away. This story has been repeated by Rob to this day in the comments of his newest videos about the newest line of Chapmans. But I really can't say I'm too convinced. From pictures and video, I could determine that the workshop they were using was Sims Guitar Works. which worked with a number of different brands and are still active. At the time of recording this video, their last social media post was 3 days ago, and Martin Sims doesn't seem to have retired. But for the sake of it, let's say that's all true. Let's say that did happen. You still have a line of guitars with supposedly a very big demand, and these aren't cheap guitars. £3,500 a guitar. That's a lot of money. Why not go to another shop and try and fulfill those orders? It really seems strange to me to abandon something performing so well, unless, you know, it wasn't. In March of 2020, less than 2 weeks after Chapman's apology/statement video, which is also now deleted, Chapman announced a new line of battle-worn guitars, which was covered by multiple guitar medias at the time. In reality though, it wasn't a new line of guitars, but 7 British standard models that they didn't sell, and they relicked. But actually looking at some of that relicking, it looks a little bit more like Chapman took them out for a fun day out at the beach. But importantly, these were the first time we ever got to see any British standards that weren't the 4-NAM prototypes that we saw in 2018. But it does beg the question, if this guitar line was in such high demand like we were told, how did no one get one and you still have 7 left over? 7 left over in which you bashed them up, changed the name of the line of guitars, and then marked them down by over half. But so far we're up to 11 British standards that we know of in existence. There was the 4-NAM prototypes and the 7 battle-worn guitars. But I found one more, and this is where it gets really interesting, because I found it today, November 17th, 2022, listed brand new by Chapman on the official Chapman Reverb store. And it was listed for £1,000. It's an over 70% discount on what they were initially asking for the same guitar in 2018. And it's brand new! You can't even say it's lost resale value, it doesn't even have sale value. It hasn't been sold yet and it's down 70%. Like, I thought these guitars were best of the best.
It's the best of the best. And that really was the objective from Chapman Guitars.
But this one's in the bargain bin.
Hi there, it's voiceover editing KDH here to bring you some fresh news. The British standard that started out at £3,500 has been reduced again to £850. And not only that, the Chapman Reverb store has added 3 more British standards, all at £850 each. So that brings up the known total of British standards to 15.
And so there's no confusion, look in the description of the listing. This is a British standard. Honestly, it seems like a pretty good deal. Free shipping too. I would assume they're losing money on this. I even thought about buying it because it would have been a funny meme, but nah. But I'd have linked it in the description. So we've gone through 3 different iterations of British-made Chapmans. Let's go for the 4th. The new announcement. The Chapman Workshop series. One model, the ML1.
And these are best of the best.
Hang on, didn't you say that last time?
It's the best of the best.
The price for buying that in the UK is £3,500, but if you're anywhere else in the world, it's £2,999, because you have to pay import tax and VAT when it arrives in your country. For example, if I was to buy one and have it delivered to me, I'd have to pay 23% VAT, plus the exchange rate on the pound to euro. I'd end up paying €4,222 for this Chapman, which is a hell of a lot. So the real question is, will these sell? Like, I'm sure they're good. They'd have to be at that price point. But at the price point, it's not just quality that we're talking about anymore. There's a lot of competitors in that field, and they have benefits that Chapman do not have, such as resale value, which, as we've already seen, is non-existent with the previous high-end Chapmans, and also an established reputation in high-end guitars. For example, I could buy a Sir for much less than this Chapman would cost me, and with that, not only would it have some resale value, so in the case that I didn't actually gel well with the guitar, I wouldn't lose out too much, but there's also an established roster of people who play those guitars. I can actually have a chance to play them out in certain shops. There's added benefits that these high-end Chapmans just don't have. Now, I've seen in comments people have been asking who's really making these Chapmans, and Chapman have been dancing around the answer. So, time to do a little bit of detective work.
Chapman released some video footage from the workshop where these guitars were being built, and I'd like to show you a few things which might help us determine what factory is building these guitars. This is the top of a Chapman being laid out on a table, and I'd like to draw your attention to the top left of the screen grab, where you can see a mat of some type underneath the top. It looks very similar to this work mat here. This is a screen grab of a Chapman neck being sanded, and I'd like to draw your attention to two things: the carpet that the table is topped with, and the wall in the top right of your screen. It seems to be very similar to this sanding setup, with both the wall being the same colour and the type of carpet that the table is topped with. And for the sake of brevity, this will be my final comparison, though I could do more. Take note of the colour of the wall, a white painted wall, and just the overall type, model and colour of the planer that we're looking at. They're planing a Chapman neck here. Same colour wall and same exact planer. Now any single one of these comparisons could be brushed aside as coincidence, but when there's this many I start to think that it's not a coincidence at all, and there really aren't that many British guitar workshops to go through. From what I've seen, I believe that the new builder of the Chapman Workshop series is PJD Guitars, so there's no doubt that these will be good instruments, but it does demand the comparison of guitars built out of the same woods by the same people, but not for anywhere near the same price.
I've got to say though, it's a bold move. I look at all these other brands. Ormsby started out custom shop, handmade, high-end boutique reputation, built that reputation, and then moved into the Korean and Indonesian range. Jackson, same concept. Charvel as well. ESP, they started out as parts, but when they started making guitars, who were they making them for? George Lynch, Kirk Hammett. They were high-end and then moved into LTD. You've got Fender, you've got Gibson, you've got BC Rich. All the same thing, PRS, then they moved into PRS SE. So all of these brands that I'm listing off start out high and then work towards the cheaper, affordable guitars. There aren't too many that do the opposite way around. The only brand that I can really think of that started off low and worked their way up would be Ibanez. I'm probably blanking on a few others, but there aren't as many as there are that worked down. And Chapman are in the Ibanez camp. They're trying to work up, and that's much more difficult because they've already established a reputation for being cheaper. Even Andertons have pigeonholed them into that category.
We also stock Chapman guitars and Reverend for players who want a high quality, versatile guitar at a lower price.
Now I do commend the keep trying attitude, and maybe fourth time's a charm, but I do have to say that I'm not really sure I see a demographic here that's going to make these guitars work, at least not at the price point that they're currently at. Their slightly more unique selling point is that they're made in Britain, but that selling point really mainly appeals to British people. And with the UK just recently officially in a recession, it's really not a great time for disposable income. So it's pretty safe to say that the sale of these very high-priced guitars will be a bit more difficult. And I'm not sure I really see too much of a difference from the 3 other attempts at starting a British-made Chapman line. But maybe I'm wrong. I could be. The new line of Chapmans is supposed to be released on Reverb, hasn't been yet, so we can't judge any sales, but maybe they'll sell really, really well. In the meantime, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.